Good morning and welcome back to part two of our webinar on suicide prevention. Just to give a short rundown of our last session. So we talked about, we were able to define what suicide is, some notions that come with suicide, such as an attempt, an ideation, active suicide, passive suicide. We were also able to understand, what exactly is it? How does it come about? It's especially it being as a symptom of mental illness. What are the signs and symptoms that come with it as a result? As well as getting to an understanding of what are some of the myths and misconceptions that surround suicide, especially in the African context. And now on to part two of our sensitization. We are majorly going to focus on prevention efforts, as well as, offering support, rather being support systems to the people around us that we know or are aware to be struggling with suicide, as well as with suicidal thoughts or ideations. So maybe just to start us off, we can have my colleague George just tell us, maybe if we can ask what, when we are talking about having conversations of hope, talking about being support systems or offering support to people who are struggling with suicide. So at an individual level, what would you say, or even at a community level, what would you say, would be our best place to start in regards to having honest conversations in regards to suicide, as well as mental health? Do we have George on the call?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can go ahead.
Sorry, I think my network was not good enough. Yeah, thank you for the question. And just to add on what you've mentioned is that at least 2 weeks ago we started this conversation on mental health and suicide prevention, and I think continuing with the conversation is really important. And back to your question regarding communities and how, as individuals as well, we can be able to support and even start this conversation on suicide. And one of the things that we can do, first of all, is to educate ourselves when it comes to suicide, because most of the time we assume a lot of things, and one thing that we normally assume is that suicide is a spiritual attack on a relative or an individual, and just understanding that it is a symptom of a mental condition is one thing that will really, really help us to change the narrative. And one thing you can also do, because most of the time we have interacted with people who have had either suicidal thoughts or even attempts, being able to check on them, and apart from that, being a good listener will at least ensure that we start, first of all, start the conversation, because you cannot be able to start the conversation, not acknowledge that it is there. And by listening, you get to understand what this person is going through. And we are changing the language when we talk about suicide. That will also help us prevent it. And one thing that has been done so far by the task force that we had 2 years ago, and the changes that have been made so far, is to decriminalize suicide. And instead of saying one committed suicide, we're now saying one died by suicide, so that it doesn't become a label. Because if we use the word committed, we are putting that particular action as a crime, yet it is a cry for help. And of course, sharing personal stories, most of the time we want to keep the stories to ourselves, and we don't really want to talk about it, and that creates more problems in the community, whereby we don't acknowledge that these are things that are happening and they need to be tackled head on. When it comes to the community setup, there are many things that we can do, and one of them is what we are doing today, sensitizing the public and talking about suicide. And this can be done by organizing campaigns like what we have today, the session on suicide prevention. And in addition to that, having places, or even what we normally call safe spaces, where individuals can come and just be themselves and talk about their experiences, we also go a long way in ensuring that we start this conversation on suicide and mental health, and partnering with people as well, because we cannot work alone, and different organizations that deal with mental health cannot work alone. We have a lot of CBOs, a lot of NGOs coming together and working together to be able to spread this message. Will also ensure that we sensitize more communities and more people in our country and beyond, and for them to understand that this is a major issue. And I think last week we, as a hospital, we did a work together in partnership with other organizations, including the government, and that was one of the ways that other organizations and CBOs can do to ensure that there's that collaboration, which will be will have a ripple effect when it comes to starting the conversation on suicide. And what we'll finish up with is supporting the individuals who have mental health by providing easy access to mental health. That way, when someone asks them, where did you get help? I got this assistance from this particular place. And in case someone else in the family has similar incident, or maybe even a friend, it becomes much easier. And one thing we can do is having policy advocacy, which I'm happy that is still happening in the current moment. So that will also help us to end the stigma and, of course, start the conversation. Thank you very much, Vivian.
Thank you so much for that, George. Still in light of talking about being proper or being healthy support systems, maybe to my colleague Shalom, what would you say would be the role of support networks when it comes to suicide prevention? So when we talk about being friends, being family, or even being co-workers that can potentially be support systems for people who are struggling, what does it mean to be a support network, and why is it important to have such support systems in place?
Good morning, and thank you for that question, Vivian. It's an honor to be back to continue this conversation as we had begun. And as George has just begun by more like getting into some of the things to address the myths and misconceptions on basis, I think I'd just begin and say support systems are simply the people around us. Every time I walk outside my bed, for example, the support system is the people I meet outside. It's the neighbors, it's colleagues at work, it's people that I'd call to check up on my family. And so that would be the first place to begin. So who are the people around you? Because the more we surround ourselves with people who are like-minded, similar values, people who encourage us, people who want to see the best in us, people who will tell us when we are maybe we are deviating from maybe our values, or we are not happy as we used to be, then those are people that we'd say are building value to us. And so that's the importance of having a good social support system. And so where do they come in when we talk about suicide prevention strategies? Now, when you have a positive social support system, then these are people who would help us remain in check. That is to say, when I begin to isolate myself, I am not participating in activities I used to enjoy together with them. I am not, there's change in behavior, for example. I am not responding to calls. My talks are a bit pessimistic. These are people who will be able to track them as soon as we begin to exhibit these symptoms. And so they would help us counter the thoughts. And these thoughts would be whatever is happening that is affecting my well-being, that is leading to me feeling like life is hopeless and has no meaning. Now they'd help me counter these thoughts and remind me of maybe the victories that I've had, remind me of the journey that I've walked before, reminded me of things I've overcome, reminded me of things we talked about, and the dreams and goals that I was trying to work towards. And when they remind us these things, they would help counter the thought that life is meaningless, this problem is overwhelming, I can't find a way out of this. I think people will not miss me if I am out of this world. And so they'd help them come back to check and remind us, if I am to leave, who will I leave these people and how will they feel? And so just to remind the person when they are feeling all these overwhelming thoughts to just get back on track. I'd also say they'd remind them of core values. If it is a social support like a family would remind you, our values as a family do not support you to feel the way you're feeling. Our religious beliefs as a family do not support you to feel the way you're feeling. And so what is it that we can do for you? Maybe pray for you, maybe read the word, for example, or from whatever religious perspective or affiliation that the family or the individuals subscribe to, they'd remind you, what does the word say? What kind of songs would encourage you at a time like this? What kind of practices could encourage you at a time like this? And that way, this person can be able to overcome this thought and be able to see life ahead of it. They'd also create a support system where if we know a friend of us has been struggling with their mental well-being, we would come and support them, show up for them in their house, maybe cook for them. If they have children, take these children to school, allow this person to just have some time where they're being taken care of. That means they could also be, a social support can also become your caregiving support system. And I think this and many more that I would think of would be some of the importance of having a social support system. Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you so much, Shalom, for the wonderful nuggets. But also just to add on, on some of the things that Shalom has just mentioned, when we are talking about, especially if you come into contact or if you're in relation with someone who is actively suicidal, meaning maybe they have come up with a plan and they've even gone ahead to ensure that they have the tools or the resources to help them, with their plan, just talking to them, being there with them, things such as simple as setting up phone calls just to assess for matters such as safety, just asking them who is around you, and even as you are probing into exactly how far they are into their plan, just ensuring you're with them until they get contact or they get support with a mental health professional. And of course, when we're talking about follow-up care, just asking them, we don't stop support once we have either referred them or we have connected them to a mental health professional. Follow-up care is just finding out, you have started on this journey, how are you finding it? Not in a way of really probing into the nitty-gritties of what exactly is happening in their therapy process or in their therapy room, but just to find out, how are you finding the care you're getting? What else, or rather, what else would you need from me? Do you want me to accompany you to your appointments? Do you want me to be actively involved in your therapy process? And if you don't want me to be actively involved, what else can I do for you? Can we do check-ins? Can I just find out, is everything okay with you? Is everything going great? And when you talk about, running errands for people, ensuring they get they have food, setting up things as simple as cleaning appointments for them. Because one thing you realize with suicide is that it's an extreme symptom of an existing mental health condition. And with that comes a lot of incapacitation. So there could be a struggle with functionality, a struggle with productivity. So just being that extra helping hand, just being that extra support could go a long way. So maybe just to follow up and exactly, or rather on what Shalom has said, what, or rather to my colleague Arthur, what would you say would be now practical strategies that we can implement in our day-to-days to help people, or rather to be more supportive? Remember, we're talking about having support systems. So if we are saying, me as Vivian, if I know someone who is struggling, what can I do in my day-to-day to be more supportive to this person who is struggling with suicidal thoughts or ideations?
Thank you so much, Vivian, and good morning to everyone who is on this call. Yes, my name is Ada Gishuru, and thank you so much for, again, this follow-up webinar. I remember last time we shared quite a lot, and one of the things that we said is that, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary issue, that means that, yeah, we can actually intervene, we can actually help. And this is not about the role. This role is not about the professional only. It's all about all of us, the lay people. Anyone can help any person who is struggling with suicidal thoughts. I'll begin by quoting someone here who gave us a very interesting quote. And she said that when we recognize that someone is having suicidal thoughts, we reach out. We are instantly planting a seed of hope that they are not invisible, that they are not alone. And therefore, that means that if at all we end up reaching out to someone who is kind of struggling, then again, we are telling them that you're not alone, you're not invisible, we are here to help you. You might not have all the words like a professional to just maybe make sure that the person is okay at that moment, but just being there is very, very okay. And just to build on to what Shalom has already shared, I'll just mention a few things. Number one is to make sure that you're creating a safe space for dialogue. This is where everything starts. Make sure that you reason non-judgmentally, because already there is a lot that this person is, there is a lot that is going on in this person's mind. Validate their emotions. Make sure that, yeah, you know, they're sharing their emotions and you're validating them. Acknowledge their pain and express understanding. Even if you don't fully understand what they are going through, is always good, and they will feel loved and they will feel, okay, they need to share with you. And also it's also good for every one of us to learn warning sign, the warning sign of suicide. Symptoms like withdrawal, mood swings, reckless behavior, or even talking about being a burden. Because most of the times we interact with colleagues, friends, family members who are having these suicidal symptoms. But if at all we don't know the symptoms or the signs, then we will never be able to intervene. Offering this early intervention is very, very key. The other thing is to always make sure that we are encouraging professional help, just suggesting that, a therapy can help, counseling can help, help them find a therapist. By just mentioning, you can go to Chiromo, you can call this therapist, you're actually helping that particular person. And even sharing mental health resources. For example, maybe, a hotline, a toll-free number like the one for Chiromo, the 0800-220-000. You helping this person feel like, yeah, you're offering the materials, you're offering what I need, and at any given time, I can be able to call these particular people and I can get the help that I need. The other thing is to make sure that you're present and you're patient. Spend quality time with them. Isolation can intensify suicidal thoughts. We always say that we heal in a community, not in isolation. And therefore, don't allow this particular person to be isolated. Be with them, even if you don't have to talk to them every other single time. Make sure that your hand and your presence is felt. Then encourage healthy coping mechanism. Most of the times people withdraw, people are isolating, you feeling you don't have the energy to get out of your house. Just encourage some simple things. So for example, maybe exercises. Let's take a walk, let's go out, let's move our bodies. We know very well that whenever we move our body releases the feel-good hormones, the endorphins, that end up counteracting any kind of stress hormones that our body might have built up, and we end up feeling good and that can help them so much, can help them feel better at that moment. It is also good to remove potentially harmful items. You realize that this person, again, they have knives, they have chemicals in their houses, all these harmful things that very well that can be quite of a danger to them. Is always good to remove them. You're reducing the accessibility of suicidal materials to near them. Then help them build support network. Are they close to their friends? Are they close to their family? Can they get in touch? with that, you're trying to just make sure that, yeah, you're building their social capacity. And the most important thing is to make sure that you're respecting their boundaries. They might be isolating, they might not be talking to you, but again, they need their boundaries respected. So make sure that you respect their boundaries, make sure that you maintain their dignity, which is very, very key. They are still who they are. And like George mentioned, yes, it's not a suicidal person. Their names, you maintain their names, call them by their names. It's Arthur who is having suicidal thoughts, but not a suicidal Arthur. I hope that helped build on whatever Shalom had already started. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Arthur, for that. I think one of my very key takeaways is that we don't hurt in isolation. So it's a bit of an unfair standard to have of ourselves to heal in isolation. That means we need community. We need people around us to support us in that regard. Remember, in our earlier session, we talked about the role that stigma plays when it comes to when it comes to putting people at risk or at harm of not reaching out for help. So in the spirit of breaking stigma, maybe to my colleague George, what would you say would be the role of institutions, so such as educational institutions, religious institutions, where when it comes to ensuring we start early conversations in regards to mental health as well as suicide prevention? Because remember, we talked about the stigma cycle, whereby we are going to say if someone is worried that they're likely to be prejudiced against their mental health status, they're likely to avoid talking about it. And when they avoid talking about it, they're not going to reach out for help. So when we talk about health-seeking behavior, so it means they will not reach out for help. And when they don't reach out for help, then we find that the statistics of people not reaching for help in regards to their mental health is going to go up. So maybe we can now look at what are the roles that institutions can play, especially educational institutions, because we find that this is one of the institutions that are very constant throughout a person's life when it comes to ensuring we have early conversations in regards to mental health and narrowing it down to suicide prevention. I don't know if we still have George on the call.
Yes, I'm still here, Vivian. Thank you so much for that question. And I've really enjoyed listening to Shalom and Arthur and the pointers that they have given. And in addition to what they have said, one of the things that I believe will really work well with us when we're talking about institutions is what they can do, because they have a higher reach and they can even have more impact. And just to mention that we are also part of the family institution, because that's where every institution that we have in the country or in the world starts from. When it comes to education, I like to start by mentioning that schools are a major one to begin with. And then that will solve close to half the problems that we have. Because most of the time our children, they're not feeling well, but they really do not have a name to give the feelings and the thoughts that they're having. So if you can be able to incorporate mental health curriculums in the different curriculums that we have in different levels, then that will really go a long way in sorting out the problem and, of course, educating our children. Teacher training is also very, very important. And if I may ask a few people, if I would randomly ask anyone, how was your experience in school? Some people will tell you, some teachers really mention really mean things when I was growing up. I will not amount to anything. I'm just, some really hurtful things. And that really affected most people growing up. If teachers can be trained on how to handle mental health and even how to even handle children who perhaps seem not to be aligning to what they expect, that will also go a long way in ensuring that the institutions and the people who are in the institutions know how to handle children. And by that will prevent a lot of mental health issues. And when you talk about mental health, some of the risk factors is environmental. And I believe what we are told growing up is also a major issue. Implementing some of the mental health screenings is also very important in different institutions. And this we can do by ensuring that institutions incorporate systems that the people and the workers in those places can use to ensure that they can access mental health, and they can also be assessed and referred to the necessary people who can be able now to take up the professional aspect of it. And that will go a long way in ensuring that we talk about mental health because we have it in our institution. And at the same time, we also ensure that we have access to mental health awareness, and which will also go a long way in preventing. Those are the three main points that I would really emphasize on. Thank you so much, Vivian.
Okay, thank you so much, George, for that. And I like how he emphasizes the reach of educational institutions, because at any particular time in your life, you are likely to, either be in contact or know someone who is in contact with, with an educational facility. So even talking about the reach, which now maybe if now we can look at it progressively. So when we also talk about workplace prevention strategies, maybe to Shalom, what would you say would be some workplace strategies, or how can workplace environments contribute to, ensuring that there is these safe spaces for people to address their mental health, as well as ensuring that, the environment at the workplace is one that supports the well-being of the employees. Remember, statistics will tell you you spend 2/3 of your life in the workplace. So this is a significant amount of time of your life to be spending. So it's also very important that we ensure that it's one that nurtures you, it's one that is very supportive, it's also one that is promotive as well as preventive to your wellness.
That's very true. I agree. So considering that statement, when you mention we spend most of our times at work, it means better part of when we are awake. So it means it's a very important factor to look at. So I'll quote what the hierarchy of controls applied to total work health. It's a model that was released. I think that was in 2023, and some of the building blocks that we were mentioning, or they were mentioning when we were looking at how can we promote workplace good mental health, which again eliminates now the symptoms of suicidal ideations, which are extreme symptoms of poor mental well-being. And the first thing on the hierarchy, they mention eliminating working conditions that tend to threaten the safety and general well-being of workers. Now, this is to say, what are the kind of working conditions that are in our workplaces today? Do we have a culture as an organization that eliminates the negative working conditions? For example, bullying, for example, assault. For example, with the systems, when there is bullying, what are some of the things that are, or rather the systems that are put in place to ensure it doesn't happen, and that therefore it doesn't affect the staff? Another thing that they would talk about was substituting health enhancing policies and programs that promote healthy well-being within the workplaces. So substituting policies would look like when there has been, for example, negative work conditions, what are the policies, what is stated? Things we talk about annual leaves, we talk about compassionate leaves, for example, promoting work-life balance within our staff, creating forums where there is education, for example, introducing maybe professionals on mental well-being where they come to give, for example, advocacy, health talks to staff members to be able to identify symptoms and address them before they get out of hand. And if we recognize they're not aware of how much these symptoms are affecting them, and of course the colleagues around them, then we can also provide a system where we have, like, for example, the human resource manager who can be able to take up the case, maybe bring in the family members to help support this individual so that they can find the right health resources. The other third thing they talk about was redesigning the work environment to ensure that there is safety, promote well-being, and even mental health. So redesigning would look like, if we've recognized where we were talking about eliminating poor or negative working conditions, then is to redesign it. And I think this is where we involve even the staff to come up with what are some of the policies you think we should put to help this organization become a better place for us to work, and involving and coming up with ideas, coming up with strategies, coming up with support systems that can work within the organizations, that can be able to be functional to our staff. The fourth thing they talked about was education, because education is power. And when we talk about education, it could be of the policies that we set. We even educate as people, as new staff come in, we are educating, allowing us to all be within the same understanding, the same knowledge, so that we can be able to know these are not acceptable within this organization. This is what is acceptable. This is how we support. For example, how do we support an individual when they are having an addiction, for example, which could be a risky behavior, that could be also a symptom of poor mental well-being. Before we get to the extremes of suicidal ideations, how can we support so that we do like what Arthur and George mentioned, breaking the stigma, not labeling them. So educating the staff so that we can all be able to understand how do we support, what are the symptoms to look out for, what as an organization, what do we stand for, and just but to mention. And the last one being encouraging personal change. We all know that the change will always begin from within, because if I am feeling hopeless because of an external trigger that happened or that I faced, for example, at work, it was bullying, it was lack of support, it was I maybe talked about an issue I was struggling with and no one really cared to support me through it. It was job insecurity, for example. It was I was feeling like I'm struggling financially and I'm not able to make ends meet, and I probably had a conversation with maybe the relevant authority, and I felt like they were not supportive. Then now we bring it to first, we need to begin from a place where individuals can recognize as an individual, before I am looking up to the organization to what they can do as an individual. What is it that I can do? Is it budgeting? Is it self-care? Is it enhancing a good social support network within work? Because if I'm interacting well with colleagues, then I can be able to have better well-being. If I am having financial management, for example, I can be able to make ends meet and live within my means. And if there is maybe extra hours to maybe earn a little extra income, then also reminding ourselves to even take to have work-life balance, so that now as staff, we are not constantly working so much to earn more to be able to make ends meet and forgetting even time to rest and take care of ourselves. So promoting that individual responsibility. And so we'd say the 5 of them would be eliminating, substituting, redesigning, educating, and encouraging our staff within the workspace. Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you so much, Shalom, for that. So that just goes to show how important it is, at the workplace, to ensure that, we are not only being aware, we are not only preventing, but also, we are ensuring the people have resources. You can do as much preventive work, but if you don't have the resources, just as a blanket, to ensure that, when push comes to shove, people actually do have the resources, they have the material, they have the referral structure or system, to help them get the support that they need. So remember, we're looking at it progressively, where we have said, at the developmental level, we're saying in the educational systems, ensuring that teachers are trained, ensuring that, they have the right information, they're able to pick up the warning signs, as well as the risk factors that could potentially put the people under them at risk of struggling with their mental health. And then at the workplace, we are saying, how can we be promotive as well as preventive when it comes to supporting employees as their wellness. So when we look at it intersectionally, so maybe to Arthur, maybe I can throw this question to you. So intersectionally, when we talk about governments, at this national level, so what would you say? What would be your take on how governments can go about addressing this matter of suicide? Remembering, or rather thinking about the stigma, the discrimination, as well as how pervasive it is, in nations. And just to follow up on that, what would you say, or rather, are there any mental health initiatives that you would say that we can look up to and say, this has worked, and maybe we can look to this in terms of, ensuring that people get the information that they need? Because remember, part of awareness is, a strategy that can be used is running initiatives, running campaigns, running programs to help people come to awareness that this is something and this is how pervasive it is. And this is why it's important for us as governments or as nations to address it. So what would be some initiatives that you can look to say this has run successfully? It can be both locally as well as globally, just to, as a starting point for us.
Okay, thank you so much, Vivian. I feel like I will pick from where Shalom left. And before even we talk about the national campaigns and what the government can be able to do for us in terms of mental wellness and making sure that we run in these campaigns against for mental wellness and to make sure that we are preventing suicide. I'll come back to the workplace, and it's good that Shalom mentioned a very, very important thing that we really need to embrace wellness at the workplace. And right now, I think most companies, most organizations are embracing this by making sure that we are having trainings, mental health trainings, and making sure that their employees are also getting in touch with the services. One of the most important things that, organizations and companies can incorporate is what we call the employee assistance programs, EAPs. And these are programs that are there to help the employees, their wellness, to promote their wellness. They know they can go somewhere, they can talk to someone, they can receive counseling, psychotherapy, psychiatric assistance, and what have you. So it's very, very good for each and every other company and organization to make sure that their employees are having what we call EAPs. Why? Because I know all the organizations and even institution value what we call a brand, and health is the essence of your brand. If you remove mental health, then you don't have a brand. And it all starts with taking the health of your workforce very, very seriously to make sure that at the end of the day you're productive and your workforce is very, very happy and productive as well. So that is very, very important. And I'm quoting that because also of the Wangari Maathai's hummingbird narrative. From there, if at all, as institution, as individuals, we can do something small, something tiny, a day at a time, we will be at a point whereby we are talking about the national awareness and the national things, the success of as the national government, what we have been able to do. But coming back to the national government and the national awarenesses, we have seen a good number of initiatives from the government. We have seen them even come up with the mental health regulations and even policies. Then these are policies that are aiming to make sure that we are having, number one, we are decriminalizing suicide, and that is very, very important. And I saw our CJ did taking the initiative and taking the mantle and making sure that very soon we're gonna decriminalize suicide, and we're not going to it is not going to be a case anymore on our side, and also making sure that we can be able to integrate mental health into primary health care. Training the clinicians to making sure that our medical officers are trained such that if at all you walk in as a person with somatic symptoms in the hospital, you're not only going to the laboratory, but the doctor is able to pick these symptoms, and they are also able to link you up with the right care, that is with the psychologist or probably even with the psychiatrist, whenever possible. Also, just did talk about combating cultural stigma, making sure that, in the grassroots, we're having these conversations, not only at the workplaces, but even calling people for a baraza, making sure that our chiefs are educated about mental wellness, because we have so many people in the village who are not aware about, what a mental illness is, what are some of the symptoms and the signs, how can we be able to promote and help these people. And I've seen this kind of initiative initiatives, and especially I'll talk about what Chiromo has done so far through the Tufunguke initiative that seek and has always aimed to make sure that we are promoting these kind of campaigns to the grassroots, making sure that we even go to the churches, making sure that we even go to the estate just to promote this wellness and to talk about mental health. And quoting what has been done so far and the success that we have received so far, I'll quote the Task Force on Mental Health of 2020. You remember in 2020, the Ministry of Health established a national mental health task force to review the state of mental health in Kenya. And after that, we have seen a good number of success from it, because this report generated nationwide dialogue on mental health and suicide prevention and resulted in government taking steps to implement policy recommendations for mental health reforms. It is out of that we have seen a number of changes. Another good changes that we have seen, and something that the government has promoted through the regulations, is to make sure that even mental health is incorporated, is covered by the insurances. Right now, you walk into a hospital with your insurance and you're covered and you're okay. You have also seen other organizations that we work closely with, like for example, the Kenya Red Cross Society, through their mental health and psychosocial support. They are there and they are able to help people. I have seen them even during when we had the calamities such like floods. They were there and they were calling, the psychologists, the counselors, to be just there to offer this psychosocial help to the people who are suffering. And that means that we are moving from the narrative of that we only need to help people with clothes, foods, and what have you. Now we are incorporating even mental health in the same. Also globally, I thank the WHO, because every other year they do give us a theme and they do talk about mental health, and they have given us a very good, statistics, making sure that every country across the globe knows very well what is happening. And even we have received donors who are there, and they're looking forward to helping people who cannot be able probably to assess mental health because they don't have an insurance, or probably they don't have money. This kind of organization do exist, and they are there to make sure that everyone is covered and everybody is there. But I'll still go back to the hummingbird. We are all in this, and every other initiative that you can do is gonna help. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Arthur, for that. So in addition to just exactly what he said, the World Health Organization, created a campaign dubbed Live Life. And part of it is, the essence of this campaign was to, for suicide prevention. So that is creating awareness, as well as, promote knowledge in that regard. And some of the recommendations that were put forth is things such as limiting access to means to die by suicide. So, things such as criminalizing some agents, some chemicals that are potentially fatal. Responsible media reporting, because one of the challenges that we find when it comes to the reporting of suicide in the media is that, they tend to either romanticize or sensationalize it, which can be very problematic. It also recommended fostering life skills in adolescents. That is why when we talk about incorporating educational systems or institutions into suicide prevention is very important. And then most importantly is increasing access to care for people affected, or rather for individuals affected that are experiencing suicidal behavior. So these are for people either who have communicated that they are struggling with thoughts of suicide, or they have had attempts of suicide before. So that is what it means, to help affected individuals, but also for the people around them. We have people who have either relatives or friends or people they know who have died by suicide, or there are people around them who are struggling with suicidal thoughts. So even as we're looking at it, at the government level, initiatives are important because they just like what George mentioned earlier, educational systems, they have the reach, to ensure that people far and wide get this information. But also now just looking at it culturally, maybe now this question I can throw to Shalom. What would you say is the importance of being culturally sensitive when it comes to approaching suicide prevention? Because we have to factor in that even as a country that is in Kenya, we are we are multi-ethnic, we are multicultural. So why is it important to be culturally sensitive when it comes to suicide prevention?
Great. Thank you for that question. And thank you also for the insights that Arthur had shared with us at the beginning and the reminders. Good. So I think culturally, culture would be defined as the way of life of people. So culture is simply the way of life of that area that I come from, that locality I come from. What's the culture around there? There's usually a few things that are common. And so usually the first place from the family, the next place is usually the people around. So what is the culture there? And one of the things we were talking about in the earlier the conversation we had first, we talked about some of the myths and misconceptions. And so some of the myths and misconceptions would look like now the stigma that comes with suicide, and even poor mental health. And so then the importance for us to enhance a good culture within our environments or our localities would be to, one, minimize the stigma that comes with suicide. That is towards survivors, for those that we know have survived. One, we talked about things like labeling. Now, if we're to provide education within the societies that we're in culturally, is one, to provide the right education so that now we minimize the labeling, we minimize the stigma that comes, so that if someone actually has a struggle, they can find a place within the culture that they have, whatever it is, the value systems, it is the relevant or say support system, which would be the professionals, for example. So it's the community-based health systems that have been put in place. Can I access maybe if it's even a dispensary, can we have a healthcare professional within that dispensary who has the right information about mental well-being and now suicide and suicide prevention, that if I go to them, they will be able to support me in a way that is factual and also can enhance my well-being, and so that I can feel the support from that immediate space. And then belief systems as a culture, what are some of the belief systems that we have? Will I label myself as someone who is struggling to cope rather with stresses, just because as a culture I've been told as a man this is what is expected of you. You can't show symptoms of poor mental wellness. You are supposed to be able to snap out of it. But what happens when I am really, really overwhelmed as a man? As a lady, what are some of the beliefs culturally that we've been exposed to, and how practical and even helpful are they to me as a lady when I'm feeling like I'm struggling with poor mental well-being that could present in extreme symptoms such as suicidal ideations? So that way, the beliefs that we are having as a culture can be of good to promote well-being individually, and even when we know of someone struggling, then they can always get the support because the right information is accessible within ourselves as the culture or as the society. I'd also talk about things like for survivors or for family members, allowing them to come back to the society, so that now of the labeling of the stigmas that we've reduced, then they don't need to feel that now because of what they did, they've been expelled from the community, or because they are the families of someone who actually died by suicide, they are expelled from the society. No, we can always accommodate them. We can bring them back. We can encourage them. We can support them because we have the right information. We've broken the stigma. There's access of these services within the society that we are in, and therefore promoting a good cultural system within our societies. The beliefs, the practices that we apply, are they of good, to individuals when now they are in places where they're not able to see past their problem, past the trigger to their ideations? Do we have a belief system and practices that can actually help them recover back and be able to just get to now healing and recovering from these systems. So it would be from these symptoms. So it would be good if from a cultural, we look at our belief systems, we look at this, the say health systems that they can access, and how do we integrate them back when we know they've struggled or are survivors or are members or support systems of individuals who actually been affected by suicide in itself. I think I'd give it back to you, Vivian, in case there's something I've not mentioned.
Thank you so much, Shalom, for that. Just to maybe quickly delve into the chat box. So maybe this question is to Arthur. Maggie on the chat asks if you could kindly expound on the psychosomatic symptoms that are associated with suicidal ideations.
Thank you so much, Vivian. Yeah, I'm on the call.
Okay.
Well, to begin with, let me define psychosomatic symptoms. And psychosomatic symptoms, the psyche is the mind, the somatic is the body. So when we talk about psychosomatic symptoms, we are talking about when probably I'm going through something like chronic stress or anxiety, and now I am having a lot in my mind, and it has already started interfering with my body. Anytime a human being is reacting to any kind of a stressor, our body releases a particular hormone that help us to handle that situation. The same way, probably if someone fears something, let's say you fear cats, you fear snakes, if you see something that is scary or threatening, your body will release a hormone that is called adrenaline to help you handle that situation. Either run away, flight, fight the situation, or something like that. The same thing happens even when we are going through a stressful situation, maybe at the workplace, relationship-wise, finances, name them. Our body will release what we call the cortisol hormone. Now, the buildup of the cortisol hormone, if it gets to a point whereby now it's chronic, it will start affecting our body. And some of these psychosomatic symptoms will be maybe a headache that doesn't go away, at the frontal part of the head, and even at the, close to the neck. That is stress headache. It doesn't go away even when you take some painkillers here and there. It will still come back over and over again. Sometimes it's the stomachache, abdominal discomfort that is there. You're feeling that some kind of discomfort, some pain. You've tried taking some, medication, but there is nothing again. You're not getting some relief. Sometimes we even go to the hospital. We tell the doctor that, yeah, we are sick. They take us to they make us have these particular lab tests and what have you. But at the end of the day, maybe they come out negative. So that's when you know that, yeah, really I'm having an issue. Another psychosomatic symptom will be feeling lethargic. That is, you feel like this body is not yours. Have you ever maybe had an 6 to 8 hours sleep? You've slept very so well, but when you wake up, you feel like this body is not yours. That general body fatigue. And you feel like, yeah, you're giving up and what have you. That is, again, a psychosomatic symptom that is telling you that all is not well. Sometimes it's that tightness of the chest. You're feeling like someone is sitting on your chest every other single time. Those kind of tensions, muscle tensions, are what we're calling the psychosomatic symptoms. If at all there is no other underlying medical condition, you have ruled out all other underlying medical condition, that's when now we term it to be psychosomatic symptoms. And it gets better if at all you end up doing these kind of wellness activities. For example, some exercises. If you handle that situation, you'll end up feeling good. You'll not even experience that headache. You'll not experience that kind of stomachache and what have you. Sometimes it's even there, some cough. People end up having some cough here and there, and you're wondering, hey, nowadays my immunity is kind of compromised because maybe you're having the same you're going through a stressful situation. So I hope that for Maggie, I've been able to bring it down to you, and maybe now you understand better what my psychosomatic symptoms are.
Okay. Thank you so much, Arthur, for that. And so as we are just finishing up, so some very important key takeaways. So at the global level, that we can do. Remember, we have looked at education systems, we have looked at governments, we've also looked at cultures as well as communities. So on a global scale, so some things that we can do. Remember, global will just mean if I do my part, you do my part, and then maybe someone from Tanzania does their part, maybe another person from Uganda does their part. That is what it means to be on a global scale. So still to emphasize on why it's very important to be culturally sensitive, so ensuring that you don't have to delve into the nitty-gritties of a different culture, but just having a basic understanding that different regions are going to have different cultures as well as beliefs. So meaning that will also bring about different challenges, as well as it's also going to bring about different cultural factors that are going to influence, a person's mental health. So that is why it's important, even at a global scale. So how can we come together? If we say maybe as the East African community, how can we come together to help us address this matter of mental health? And of course, now that ties down to sharing information. So sharing research, sharing data, as well as statistics. So that's why we are very grateful for organizations such as the World Health Organization, or what is known as the WHO, because they're the ones that conduct research and they make sure that this data, or rather this information, is available to us. We also have the issue of best practices. So of course, as mental health practitioners, we have ethical guidelines, but also just at an individual level, what are some best practices that you can adapt? So ensuring you are genuine in your interactions, you're a person of compassion, you're kind, you are patient, you are non-judgmental. So these are some of the best practices that you can adapt at an individual level. So what that basically means, if a person was to come and open up to you and tell you, hey, these have been my struggles, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to be the first person to dismiss them? Are you going to label them? Are you going to judge them? What exactly are you going to do? Or are you that person who is going to say, okay, so maybe I may not have the right information, or I may not know the best way to help you, but I know we have channels, I know we have professionals, and I can help you get to that particular point of support. So we also have issues of policy development. When we talk about governments ensuring we have regulations, so that we ensure even in the delivery of this particular service, we have ethical guidelines so that no one feels their privacy is violated, as well as, their confidentiality. So that's why it's important for policy development. And even at an individual level, for example, especially, if you're here on the call and you are a person in your workplace who can influence policy, especially if you're in HR, because HR is the one that is in charge of helping organizations or corporations come up with policy. So if you are in a position to influence policy, so how do you advocate for the wellness of the people that are going to be coming in? So ensuring that resources are allocated, ensuring that there's referral structures that are put in place to help people address it. Because yes, you can do the training, but you can also allow the professionals to come in and offer support. So when we are also talking about training, having evaluations, so ensuring you have the right information, ensuring, if you have opportunities to attend such sensitizations, it's also very important just to help us ensure we have the right information. And then, of course, now that ties down to advocacy. We want you to be an ambassador. So now once you are here, you are a wellness champion or a mental wellness champion. So what are you going to do with this particular quote unquote title? So it is now your role to ensure that when conversations are happening, you are the first person to challenge any stereotypes, you're the first person to break down any stigma that could potentially be propagated in the different conversations that could be coming about. So of course, all this is in a bid to help, or rather to improve individual help-seeking behavior. So a person around you is only going to reach out for help if they know that the people around them can listen. So that means they have good support. So they feel like they're not going to be judged once they open up, if they also have the right information. So if I know how to articulate my emotions, if I know how to articulate my behavior, if I know how to articulate my feelings, and my thinking, then I am able to pick out what is healthy, what is not healthy, what can I do about it. But also, if I know there are people around me who have reached out for help and they have gotten it, without the stigma, without the prejudice, without the discrimination, then they are likely to reach out for help in return. So this is all in a bit to ensure that we encourage others to reach out for help. So just as for closing remarks before we wrap up, there was a concern on the chat box that said that the broadcast was, or rather the webinar was being broadcasted to a third party. That was just asking for your consent to live stream on our YouTube channel. And someone also in the chat asked whether we could have a rundown of the very first part of the webinar. So we also have a streaming on the same on our YouTube channel, which is just Chiromo Hospital Group. And so that means you can have access both to the first part of the webinar as well as today's session. So also in regards to that, when it comes to spreading awareness, please feel free to share it to your networks. So some ways that you can reach out for help is that, as Chiromo Hospital Group, we have our toll-free number, which is 0800 000 to 20 000. So this is a toll-free number that you can reach out to at any particular time of distress. So at the end of it, we also have professional psychologists who will be able to be of support. They'll administer what we call psychological first aid as they help you figure out, what will be your next referral steps in regards to getting the help as well as getting the care that you need and deserve. So you can also reach us through our different mobile numbers. I will also just, for emphasis, I will post them on the chat as I allow my colleagues to give their closing remarks. But also in a bit of the same, take a mental wellness assessment. So if you log on to our hospital website, which is www.chiromohospitalgroup.co.ke, you are going to get access to a number of standardized mental wellness assessments. So it doesn't hurt to take one at any particular time, just to see where you are, how you're faring, so that even as we are talking about, being the very first step in addressing your wellness, then you're coming from a point of knowledge. So I will allow my colleague Arthur to start if he has any final remarks, then we can have Shalom.
Thank you, Vivian, to put a face on this. Arthur Gishuru, thank you so much for everyone who joined. And I only say that, we really need to prioritize wellness is not an event, is a journey. And always remember that suicide is not a standalone disease. It is a symptom within a developing mental illness or an already existing mental illness. And there is care when it comes to that. And therefore, always remember that we should be there for all of us, for each other. Like someone is saying on the comment that yes, these symptoms are very, very common among our teachers, among our friends, among our colleagues. And therefore, we really need to be there for each other, just know their patterns, just know when someone is changing and give them an ear. Make sure that you're providing a very comfortable platform for everyone for each one of us to be able to share, and therefore that is what I will end. I'll end my statements there. And also a challenge to our government that we really need to, and any person on this call, that we really need to also incorporate mental wellness and teaching in our curriculum. Like let us teach our kids emotional care. Let us raise emotionally aware kids, and that will help our generation in the future. Thank you so much, and have a good time.
Thank you so much for Arthur. So Shalom, as you give your final remarks, maybe two more questions. So someone asks whether, so the first questions are suicidal feelings a curse, to which I would absolutely say no, but I will allow my colleague Shalom to expound on that. And also, does that mean just because I have suicidal feelings or thoughts, does that mean my ancestors are unhappy with me? So I can have Shalom answer those two questions as we wrap up our webinar.
Thank you very much, Vivian. Thank you, Arthur, for those insightful words. And thank you to all of us who've been participating. asking questions and even joining us for even the second time. Thank you very much. So would I, if I answer suicidal ideations or feelings are cast? Now, sometimes we would try to find, there's something in the African setting where we learned that usually as an African setting, most of the times when we have no answers to particular questions, we tend to look towards the either religious or the cultural aspect. And so that would be one of a misconception, that they are a caste, or it means that the ancestors are not happy with me. Not really. We would say suicidal ideations are symptoms of poor mental health. And it could be depression, it could be substance use that has led to such ideations. And so in itself, we look at it and specifically say they are symptoms of poor mental wellness. So the moment we start to see them, it could be accompanied by other symptoms that are maybe not, say, spoken of a lot, and therefore that's why we're also creating such forums where we actually give the right information. So no, not really. But if you feel that it is, then what healthy ways are we looking to address? If I am having suicidal ideations and if I feel like it's a cultural thing, then what healthy ways am I looking into addressing it to restructure back to coping well and reducing, or rather dealing with the trigger that led to these such ideations? And where symptoms have persisted, then I have sought medical advice, and you could actually meet a criteria or a particular diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis, that when treated with medication, the symptoms would minimize, or rather go away. And so you'd see the person would get better. So if it's cultural, deal with it in a healthy way. If it is actually, if you could actually be open to the idea of actually I'm having a mental illness, then seek the right professional treatment. So I will close with that. And just a reminder to all of us that we all have the potential to work and cope within the normal stresses that we have. So do not feel like your life is not of worth. Always know that there's someone to help, a professional to help. Always look within the society that you have, the social support that you have. Invest in positive social support, because you don't know when that support will be of help to you, especially on times when you're feeling low or not at your best. And for those of us who've been directly affected by suicide, we have survivors around us, or we are the family members of those who we lost to suicide. Be encouraged that there's a lot of us, but do not let that hold you back. There's hope. We could get better, we could recover, and even we could lead a healthy lifestyle that would prevent that from ever happening again. So thank you very much for this, and God bless you all. Amen.
Thank you so much, Shalom. Just as a point of emphasis on why it is important to reach out for help, there's a sociologist I love, by the name Brené Brown. And she says, to know pain is human, to need is human. Many of us are willing to extend a helping hand, but we are very reluctant to reach out for help when we need it ourselves. So it's as if we have divided the world into those who need help, or rather those who offer help and those who need it. And when we look at it truthfully, we are both. So that is to mean, sometimes you are the one who is going to be offering the help, and sometimes you're the one who's going to be needing it. So, and need is the most beautiful compact between human beings, because it's the thing that brings us together. It's the acknowledgement that I don't have to figure it all out by myself, that there are people around me who are going to help me figure out. So all I have to do is reach out, So, and with that wraps our webinar of the month. Thank you so much for being a lovely audience. We look forward to hosting you more on such forums, just to, in a bid of opening up, as Arthur mentioned, as Chiromo Hospital Group, we're running a campaign on Tufunguke. So in a bid to ensure we are all opening up, we're having honest conversations. So I look forward to hosting you more. I wish you well. Have a lovely Tuesday and rest of week ahead.